On the 17th of January 2005, the police department of Cooperstown received a distress call, and nothing remained the same after that. The entire members of the community were hit with shock as the innocence of their town was stripped by a dreadful murder. The body of 25-year-old Darren Cruz was found rotten and decomposed in the basement of his girlfriend, 23-year-old Tanisha Williams, 3 days after his gruesome murder. What the police would uncover while investigating this case would be a truth that would take the entire community by storm. After discovering Darren's decaying body, the detectives in charge of the case found a trail of obsessive, delirious, psychotic, and bipolar disorder traits. A few reports from the detectives give detailed information about how no one had seen any of this coming. It was clear that none of the people around the couple would have suspected that something was amiss. However, the most disturbing part of this story is the reason behind Darren's horrific death. What could have caused anyone to think of ending Darren's life most terrifyingly? 23 years old, Tanisha Williams was an extremely brilliant and beautiful woman. She was so attractive that many mistook her for a model. Born in September 1982 to Alice Williams and Roger Williams, Tanisha was an extremely intelligent child who never had to struggle with her academics. Ever since her childhood days, Tanisha had always excelled among her peers and beyond everyone's imagination. She always set a new record for herself after breaking the old ones she made, and after a while, it was obvious that no child in Cooperstown could compete with her level of intelligence. Growing up, Tanisha's intelligence did not go to waste as she decided to major in computer engineering in college, months after she got a full-paid scholarship to study any course of her choice in one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Tanisha's parents were over and beyond the moon when they first got the news of Tanisha's fully paid scholarship. It was a relief that they would not have to spend much to support their daughter's wild dreams. Tanisha was not content with studying computer engineering on her own. She desired to major in something deeper and more technical, like cybersecurity and hacking. As a child, it was obvious that Tanisha had a thing for always wanting to know everything about everyone around her. Just like her intense hate of the dark, she hated being in the darkness at any point in time. According to her closest friend in college, Olivia Ramez, Tanisha always thought it was some sort of crime for her to not know everything about everyone. She asked quite a lot of questions about people's personal lives, and sometimes it just felt like she was trying to learn about us, inside and out. However, this odd behavior was not something Tanisha had suddenly exhibited during her days in college. It had been obvious from the start that she loved learning about people's secrets. It sort of made her feel like a god, like she had control over everything. At first, her parents considered this behavior a result of her traumatic childhood, but it soon became clear that this was something Tanisha loved to do, regardless of her past. When Tanisha clocked 7, a dreadful event happened that changed the lives of the Williams forever. Tanisha's parents had planned a surprise birthday party for her after her return from school that day. So when she found the lights off, she became hysterical. A few minutes after her family returned from the mall, Tanisha was found lying half dead in the living room. Apparently, she had drunk a toxic chemical that could have killed, but fortunately, she survived and has hated any form of surprise ever since. So, when Tanisha began to exhibit these somewhat creepy behaviors, her parents blamed the event that happened in the past and did everything to satisfy her curiosity, but nothing was enough. Tanisha's quest for knowledge was insatiable. She snooped around the lives of everyone in her life, and more often than not, she ended up losing friends who could not stand her disturbing behavior. More than once, a couple of her friends had mentioned getting creeped out whenever she said some of the most private things about their lives in public, like she had been with them at the moment. But none of this bothered Tanisha. She did not care that the people around her were leaving as long as she knew everything she wanted to. When she moved to college, she had a hard time keeping her friends due to her unsettling love for wanting to know everything about them. After a while, it became obvious that no one was willing to stick with someone with such a disturbing attitude. Now, on the other side of town, Darren Cruz was a 25-year-old upcoming chef whose passion for cooking and culinary activities surpasses everything else in his life. Darren loved cooking and trying out new dishes as though they were the most important things in his life. Darren's life was deemed boring by his parents, so when they got the choice, they made Darren move to another part of the town, hoping he'd find something exciting to do aside from cooking. However, none of them would have expected what they were pushing him into. Darren and Tanisha's first encounter happened at the local mall. Tanisha had gone shopping for groceries while Darren went to get some ingredients for the new meals he learned to prepare. Tanisha was immediately attracted by Darren's calm and soft-spoken demeanor. She noticed the way he spoke politely to people in the queue and was surprised to see someone so well-behaved and good-looking at the same time. It was as though Darren had no idea how attractive and charming he looked. He was like a fresh flower that had never been touched. Her interest was piqued, but she could not approach him, so she decided to snoop around and find out everything about him. It took a while for her to find anything about him since he just moved to her part of the town, but she eventually found him, and when she did, she could not stop herself from falling head over heels for him. Everything she found about him showed how completely innocent Darren was. After countless days of thinking, Tanisha decided she would put herself in his life. He would be her first ever lover, so she wanted to make everything as perfect as possible. She constantly stalked him and learned everything about him. She knew everything about him, while he did not even know about her existence. She knew his timetable, his culinary schedules, his daily routine, and everything he loved, so she decided to make use of her knowledge about him to get herself into his life. One day, her opportunity to finally get into his life came, and she took it. The college was hosting a culinary training for interested students in the college, and Darren was one of the trainers in charge of the event. Tanisha knew all she had to do to get close to him was show a deep interest in cooking. She mapped out her plans to fit into everything Darren liked. She wore his favorite colors and even got a makeover to look like his ex-girlfriend. She wanted to catch his attention as soon as she stepped into the room, and she did. Darren couldn't believe his eyes when he saw her. She was like a bright light shining in the darkness. Coincidentally, she was dressed just the way he liked, and when the event started, her deep interest in learning about cooking pulled him to her. He couldn't stop staring at the woman who had walked into his life through the thing he loved most. For the first time after his breakup with his ex-girlfriend, Darren found himself falling in love with someone else. When she smiled at him, it felt like nothing else mattered. It was indeed love at first sight for him. After the first session of the training, he found a way to approach her, and they both struck up a conversation. Much to Darren's delight, Tanisha knew most of the things he liked. He was instantly attracted to her and asked her out on a date. Their first date was to a Vietnamese restaurant. Tanisha had mentioned wanting to try out new dishes, and Darren wanted to show her the beauty of experiencing the culinary lifestyle of other countries. Soon, they became inseparable. They could not go a day without calling each other. They spent every minute talking over the phone. Whenever Darren wasn't cooking, he was talking to Tanisha. Unknown to him, Tanisha stalked his social page just to find out if he was seeing someone else. Their friendship was blooming and slowly merging into a love affair. Darren asked Tanisha to be his girlfriend after a while, and this made Tanisha the happiest person alive. If only he had known what he was getting himself into. Soon after their relationship started, Tanisha's sudden urge to know every little detail about Darren overtook her, and she started finding reasons to be everywhere with him. Calling him wouldn't do justice to things, so she found a way to always be with him. She attended all of his culinary programs and accompanied him to gatherings with his friends and visits with his family. She followed him on all social media platforms and made sure to check out every person in his life. It was as though she was scrutinizing his life. At first, none of this seemed odd to Darren or anyone. His parents, grateful that he finally found someone he loved, did not suspect that Tanisha's constant clinginess was not a mere act of love. Weeks after they got into the relationship, they had their first fight after Tanisha found Darren talking to one of the ladies who attended his culinary programs. She had walked into one of them laughing and talking, and she got extremely angry. She asked to take a break from the relationship, despite Darren's pleas, but unknown to Darren. This break was a ploy for her to strategize her way around wrapping him under her control. She thought of what to constantly be in his life and how to keep him for herself. After they got back together, she stopped him from seeing any of his friends. She always had an excuse to make him miss special events with his friends. She constantly watched over his life and would not let him do anything behind her. It became so bad that he had to stop visiting his family on special occasions. During Thanksgiving, He called his parents and told them he would not be able to make it to their annual Thanksgiving celebration. According to his mother, Martha Cruz, he sounded tired, like he had been putting up with a fight and could no longer afford to fight. He told them that Tanisha had a presentation for her scholarship application and he needed to attend. This was the beginning of what would lead to a disaster. Tanisha started doing more than just keeping with her. She bugged his clothes and mobile devices, making sure she had access to everything he did. She would constantly watch him through the devices. But despite doing all this, Tanisha still wasn't convinced that Darren wasn't seeing someone else besides her, so she paid some of his colleagues to spy on him and give her reports. Darren could tell that something wasn't right at some point in their relationship, but he had no one else to talk to about it. He had very few friends because Tanisha wouldn't let him hang out with his old friends. Soon, something happened, and it changed their lives forever. 21-year-old Michaela was Darren's new assistant at his job. Michaela was a beautiful, bright, and enthusiastic young lady. She had moved away from her family after getting a culinary degree and had gotten the job to be Darren's assistant through one of her friends. Tanisha found out about Michaela's appointment on one of the days she was visiting Darren at his job, and she did not like this. They got into a huge fight when they got home, and Tanisha said mean and horrible things to Darren. She accused him of getting a female assistant because he wasn't content with their relationship and wanted to start something new with her. Darren assured her that nothing would ever happen with Michaela, but Tanisha wasn't satisfied. She decided it would be better if she started working with Darren, so she applied to his office and started working as a website developer. Weeks passed and nothing happened until one day when Michaela was invited to her family's dinner. Apparently, Darren had helped Michaela around the job a lot, and her family wanted to meet the person who made their daughter's job easy, so they invited him to one of their family events. Tanisha walked in on the two of them talking about it, and she lost it. She started telling in the office and calling Michaela all sorts of names. Regardless of how hard Darren tried to pacify her, she was uncontrollable. It was as though she had gone berserk. Darren ran after her, trying to apologize, but she wasn't having it. She believed there was something between Darren and his assistant, and that was the only reason she invited him to meet her family. When they got home, Tanisha broke down in tears. Darren got confused, lost, and speechless. Tanisha had been yelling just a while ago, but now she was crying. He apologized over and over and promised to terminate Michaela's appointment if it would make her feel better. But Tanisha did not trust him to do that. She couldn't bear having another woman work with it, so she decided to make him stop working and just stay at home. At first, she tried to talk him into quitting his job, but Darren loved his job enough to just quit for no reason. So for the first time in their relationship, he put up a fight against her, but his resistance would not last long enough. Tanisha pulled the tear card and manipulated him into thinking he was the problem. She talked about how all he did on the job was interact with women, but Darren would not be convinced. He went against her wish and continued with his job, but Tanisha wasn't going to allow it for long. She began to plot ways to stop him from working, but none worked until she found an ad for a drug that helps to keep people bedridden. She started adding a dose of this drug to his meals and drinks every time she could. Every day, she waited patiently for the day Darren would quit his job to remain at home. But when it seemed like that was never going to happen, she increased the dosage and gave him more than normal. Soon, Darren's health started failing. At first, he took it as a result of overtime and decided to take a few days off from his job. He went to see the doctor, but nothing was diagnosed. Tanisha became elated that her plans were finally paying off. She increased the dosage she gave him, and with time, his body became weaker by the day, until he finally had to quit his job. His friends who had seen the change in him tried to reach out and help him, but Tanisha cut him off from everyone. She blocked their phone numbers after warning them to stay away from him. Darren's health failed by the day, and soon, it was obvious that if care wasn't taken, he would lose his life. Tanisha saw this, and despite wanting to have him to herself, she did not want him to die. So, she invited one of her colleagues who was studying medicine to come treat him at home. After seeing Darren's state of health, her friends advised that she take him to a hospital because there was no way a minor treatment would save his life. After a long while, She took Darren to the hospital and lied that he had been taking some drugs weeks before he broke down. The doctors could not diagnose him, but they put him on treatments to help relieve his health. Darren's parents heard about this from one of their friends who saw Tanisha at the hospital, and they tried to reach out to Tanisha, but she had blocked them as well. According to Darren's mother, it felt as though Tanisha had taken over her son's life, and the bright, kind son she used to know was no longer there. Tanisha requested that Dasren be discharged for safety reasons, and when he got discharged, she took him to the basement and locked him there, only checking on him at intervals when she had to get him food. Tanisha continued her life as normal, as though nothing odd was happening. She quit Darren's job and focused on schooling and taking care of Darren. After a while, the job of looking after Darren coupled with balancing her education became a burden, so she decided to focus on her education and take care of Darren whenever she could. Her routine of feeding him 3 times a day changed, and he only got fed once a day, and sometimes he wasn't. Things became so bad, but Tanisha continued acting like all was well, until one day when she found a phone in the basement. Apparently, Darren had found a way to contact some of his friends and was telling them all he was going through at the moment. She could not believe that Darren would try to reach out to his friends, and so she decided it was time to get rid of her boyfriend. The next day, she waited for him to fall asleep before strangling him in his sleep. Darren struggled to check out of her hold, but he was weaker than his usual self, and after several minutes, Tanisha overcame him, and he gave up the ghost. She kept his body in the basement for days, but his body was starting to decay, and the smell filled the entire house, so she resorted to spraying air fresheners and lighting sweet-scented candles just to dissipate the odor that was coming out of his body. But none of this stopped the smell from going out. After a few days, some of the neighbors reported the pungent smell to the police. It was nothing like they'd perceived, and every day, the stench got stronger. So one day while Tanisha was away, the police forcefully opened her apartment after several attempts to get Tanisha to come do it, and the house was filled with the horrible stench. The detectives immediately knew that something wasn't right. They checked every room in the house and didn't find anything until one of the detectives suggested checking the basement. Nothing prepared them for the horrific scene they were about to see. Darren's body had been cut open, leaving him with no organs. Detective Mia Rose, chief detective of the police department, told the press that in all her years of service, she had never seen a more frightening scene. Forensics found traces of the drug Tanisha gave Darren, and also found evidence of Tanisha strangling Darren. Darren's parents lost their lives 2 days after this discovery in a fatal accident. Tanisha was arrested days at a motel where she had gone into hiding and was immediately charged with second-degree murder. On April 19, 2005, Tanisha Williams was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Her friends who testified against her pointed out how obsessive and controlling Tanisha could become whenever she wanted something desperately. They said Tanisha would go to any extent to keep whatever she wanted, and sadly, she had gone to the extreme to keep Darren. During her final interview with reporters, Tanisha was asked where she kept Darren's organs, and she smiled and said, "I kept them as a reminder." Want to see more like this? Then click on the video you are seeing on your screen now.